Well, here's a guy I haven't talked to for quite some time, Matt Rexroad. How are you, Matt? What's going on today?
I'm just fine. You need to tell me what's going on with Nebraska football. That's what I want to know.
Well, I have a whole podcast on that. It's called Unfiltered. I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to do a little cross marketing here. But yeah, that's called Unfiltered with Sam and Petey. But listen to that. I'll tell you everything about it.
I hope you can have as much success as your new coach as we've had with ours at USC over the last year.
Well, I hope so too. So Matt Rexroad, everyone, so my listeners know, Matt, we have listeners in 50 states and 40 countries, so not everybody is going to know our relationship. Matt Rexroad is a former business partner of mine. I've also, I had Carrie Evans on here as well, so you'll be the second business associate or partner that I had, and we were in business together for 13 years or 15 or 15 or a long time. But I asked Matt on today because I'd like to do an episode today called Generation Kill. And Matt is not an ex, but a former United States Marine. And for the listeners, Generation Kill it's a book, actually, that was written by a guy by the name of Evan Wright. Evan Wright was a Rolling Stone reporter who in 2004 wrote a book on his experience when he was embedded with the United States Marine Corps' 1st Reconnaissance Battalion during the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And he was actually in the lead Humvee, and they were literally the tip of the spear of the invasion into Iraq. And so HBO made a miniseries about it in 2008, and it's a fantastic 7-part miniseries that I recommend everyone watch. And it's a fascinating look at the Marines. And Matt Rexroad, my partner, was actually in Iraq at the same time and was part of the reserve reconnaissance Marines. Is that correct, Matt? Am I getting it right?
So I was in the reserves, but we were attached to First Force Recon. And so when we got over there, we basically handed over our flag to First Force, and we went under their umbrella. And so the battalion recon guys were up front on that, and their initial mission was a little bit different from ours.
Okay, so I don't know what First Force means from First Battalion. So how close were you to the guys that were depicted in the miniseries as far as your mission or the timeline or all those things?
So force reconnaissance is a little bit different, and the definition is that our teams generally operate beyond the range of naval gunfire. That's their tradition, although that is a little bit different now because basically naval gunfire can be pretty much worldwide. And so that definition is a little old. But the battalion recon guys, from what I know and from the series and reading the book, is they were on the front of the tip of that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. But part of the story is the fact that they felt like fish out of water. They were in a place that they really shouldn't be. Here are these recon Marines who are taught to do recon missions, now doing combat assault as part of General Mattis's, and General Mattis was their commander, or Ferrando was their commander, and Mattis was his commander. But it was the whole shock and awe thing. And so they were in a part of the conflict of the story is that they were in a place that they weren't trained necessarily to be. It's just that they were the baddest of the bad, and that's where they were put.
Sam, nobody did what they were supposed to be doing. We had trained for a decade to
chaos.
Yeah, we were trained. Well, I think it was it was a wild time, and I can tell you that. We had people who were still wearing green camouflage utilities when we were in the desert there because we didn't have a lot of stuff. We were changing our vehicles up at the moment, right before everything kicked off. We were still making adjustments to vehicles, and we were in vehicle combat. I see these things now where they have these armored vehicles. I've never ridden an armored vehicle in my life. I probably rode 100,000 miles through Iraq over a 7-month period, and I never once was in an armored anything. We just had soft-top vehicles with 50 cals and 250 Gulfs on them, Mark 19s, and we just rolled wherever. But that's not what we were trained for. all going to scuba school and free fall school. I never saw a parachute anywhere. The only swimming we saw was in the rivers that they told us we couldn't go into for health reasons. And, we were just, our whole secret was speed. We just moved very quickly in these vehicles and nothing could stop us.
And so is the depiction, I've been told that the depiction in the miniseries is pretty close to what it was as far as the gear, the language, the way that these guys talk to each other. What was is that your, would you agree with that or?
100%. When I got back from Iraq, I got out of the Marine Corps. And so when I watched that series, everything just kind of locked back in for me in terms of the words people used. The technical advisors on that show did a really good job of really describing how it was. And, what a lot of people don't appreciate I was a staff sergeant, and that's a pretty big deal in the normal Marine Corps, right? In the Fleet Marine Corps, that's a big deal. But we had tons of staff sergeants in my units, and we had teams of staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants because the force reconnaissance community tends to be a little bit older and more experienced. And so, and also, despite the fact that we have, the normal command structure of the Marine Corps with majors and lieutenant colonels and captains and whatever, it's all still very flat. It's a much more professional organization than the regular Marine Corps. You don't call officers by their first names, but you also don't have, the same sort of formalities you have other places.
Right. One of the things I was going to ask was one of the fascinating parts, and I think you were probably about 10 years older than those guys that were depicted in the miniseries. So they were younger guys, probably in their 20s, and you were, you were 30, in your 30s?
Yeah, I turned 33, I think, or 34 over there. I had my birthday.
Okay, so these guys are a little bit different generation. I think that you're probably a little bit, about 10 years older than they were. But one of the fascinating things that came out of it for me was that if you remember Tromley, he's the guy that ran the saw in the Humvee. It's kind of got made fun of or this, that, and the other. But there was a part of that miniseries where he's like standing out there there's incoming fire, and he's not taking cover, but he's like scouting to see where the fire's coming from, and they're yelling at him to get down, this, that, and the other. And then he later tells the reporter, he goes, honestly, I get more excited about playing video games at home than I was just now. And I just thought that was a fascinating comment on, I don't know, society or whatever. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, no, but there are certain parts of the military that have become very video game oriented, and I know that I think the New York Times did a series about these drone pilots who are operating out of Nevada in the Air Force, and they, they're blowing stuff up all over the place, and they were talking about how these pilots who don't get danger pay or don't get any of the war zone compensation. A lot of them are dealing with some really difficult mental health issues because they're blowing up stuff from Nevada. And people say, "Oh, it's just like a video game," and they just go home and put it all away. But it's been really difficult for them to compartmentalize a lot of that stuff and make it just like, "Hey, I'm done with my shift. I'm going away." I'm sure there's some of that stuff, and I know that. There was another book written by a guy out of UC Davis, and I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but they had some crazy scene in the movie where these people are out there having some drunken party, firing weapons into the sky and whatever else, and I don't believe anything like that ever really happened. It was from the first Gulf War, I believe was the description there, or what they were trying to convey, but that's a little bit of the Hollywood stuff. I think very few people are out there attempting to draw fire. That just seems stupid.
Yeah, well, it is stupid. It is stupid. I think one of the things that fascinated me most about your journey was that you actually were in Saddam's palaces. Tell me about that role, and I'd love you if you wouldn't mind sending me that picture. We'll put it up on social media for my social media page so people can see you at the palace. But talk about your role there, that mission, and what was that like, and I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, what a historical moment for you.
Well, there was actually several palaces. So we were for the first time I met General Mattis was actually there in Babylon, which is where we lived for, I don't know, 6-8 weeks, something like that. It was a pretty miserable time. And one of Saddam's palaces were there. And as soon as we got there, it was pretty clear that people were going to be trying to move into these palaces to stay there. And we were just kind of like, man, the last place you want to be is in this big, huge place up on a hill where everyone can see us. So we went down by the river and got away from all of that. But we lived there for a while, just down at the base of it, maybe half a mile away or less, actually. It was completely cleaned out. And then later on, we had to go to near the Baghdad airport, and he had a series of palaces there, actually, and one of them had a big moat around it. I could send you a picture of me standing next to Saddam's water ski boat there. He had, that he could drive around this moat, and we went out there to look at these associated buildings around it, and they're not small buildings. They were also very palatial. And, the Air Force is really good at what they did, and there'd be a hole that was the size of a basketball in the roof, and then there wouldn't be anything left in that building, right? Everything was blown out. There'd be a chair 2 miles away that came out of the palace. It got blown out, a sofa. I remember one time driving along and seeing a bunch of Army soldiers just relaxing on all this furniture that was probably worth thousands and thousands of dollars out in the middle of some date grove sleeping because the explosion from the Air Force had blown one of these couches, a mile away, and these
is quite the contrast. They're out in the middle of the desert, and here, and all this ornate furniture. There they are. I mean, just chaos.
And all the Air Force had was a little tiny hole in the top of this building, and everything was gone. I mean, and I say everything. There was not a speck of dust in that building. There was nothing. It was just gone. And people would say, "Well, what do you mean there's nothing in it?" I'm like, "There's literally nothing in it. It is gone."
Amazing. So, give me help me out with the time frame of when that happened. When you lived there, was it right after the invasion, or is it months after the invasion, or?
Oh no, it was the invasion probably was still going on, and I remember that it was pretty difficult when we were there because it was just really hot. We actually kind of already won at that point, or pretty close to it, and so. We had about 30 days where we really didn't do anything. We didn't really have any missions. There was nothing to do. There were no raids to go on. And so it was a bad time because you had a bunch of Marines who were, that's when people started to get sick. They started to get homesick. They started to think about other things. We had some discipline problems. My attitude was bad. I'm sure a lot of other people's were too. My team and my platoon was on here. They'd be telling you how bad, it was just a bad deal. And I remember on the 4th of July, General Mattis had us in this big theater. And, he just walked out there and just gave this speech. And it just like, yes, that is what I signed up for. I will run through a wall for this guy. Let's go. And it was phenomenal.
Why was your attitude bad? Hungry, tired?
Well, because...
Missed your family? I mean, this is before you had a family, right? Or were you married at this point?
I was married, but it was July or late June, early July. We'd been gone since before February, or maybe early February, or somewhere in there. And the war was over, but we didn't get any missions, and that was our problem is that we didn't have. I mean, when I say we did nothing, I literally mean we did nothing. We just sat there and drank water and tried to survive in the heat. And I remember one day. This major at the time, he was like, what we're going to do? We're all going to practice the Marine Corps martial arts system. And we're just like, something? That's a bad idea. If we start fighting right now, there's going to be broken arms, legs, heads, everything. We are going to kill each other. And that's a really bad idea.
But isn't that what Marines are? A Marine's supposed to be killers, so that's why they did it.
But it's supposed to be other people, not each other. And it would have been, at that point in time, it would have been a bloodbath. And so quickly, everyone's like, "Yeah, no, screw that. We're not doing any martial arts."
So you didn't do it. You didn't do it.
No, we didn't do it. But another, it was good.
Another one of the scenes in the miniseries that I thought was great was, they were waiting around forever and ever in Kuwait City or whatever, and they finally they saw that here comes a bunch of cars from Kuwait City or wherever they came from with their Pizza Hut delivery people. And they had these, and they like, we're going in. I mean, after these months and months of just like boredom, like this is finally going to freaking happen. And so, Sixta gives the famous, Master Sergeant Sixta gives the famous speech, which I can still recite to this day because I actually used it a couple times on political campaigns. But he gives the speech, and everybody's just fired up, and they run to their Humvees, and then, true story, they end up sitting there for like 3 hours in their Humvees. I mean, I don't know if that was on purpose or if it was because something logistically happened, but these guys were revved up to kill something by the time they got there.
So I'll tell you that our mission at First Force was there's a man-made hill that Saddam Hussein had built on the Iraqi side of the border. It's Safwan Hill. And our mission that we had been training for was we were going to go in with helicopters, land at least, I don't remember, a platoon, several teams there, and we were going to kill everyone on top of that hill because it was the one observation point that they would be able to see us coming, right? Because they didn't have the satellites like we did and everything else. So that was our deal. And at the very last minute, they decided, nope, we're just going to send in missiles and blow the top off that hill. And that's exactly what they did. Is they blew the top off that hill, and we didn't go. But I had to go forward. Yeah, I had to go forward and up to the border, probably about 4 or 5 days before the invasion started. And I don't know what the Marine Corps does. I don't know what I'm sure was some grand plan that I was unaware of. But I went up there, and it was like a bunch of pit bulls that had been beaten by a stick, and they were angry and mad. And I would see these reports of fights and Marines shooting each other and soldiers beating the hell out of each other and just all kinds of crazy stuff. And I remember when everything kicked off, they had what's called Blue Force trackers, and I remember looking at this screen as everyone was crossing in, and we were going to leapfrog beyond where they were. And I just remember thinking, there's nothing in the world that's going to stop these people. There is a can of whoop ass that's about to be opened up, and there's nothing that's going to stop them. The Iraqis should just get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, that's most people. I'd like to pretend that I understand all that, but I haven't been there, so it would be presumptuous of me to say that I actually understand that. But most civilian population, it's not relatable, right? I mean, it's complete chaos. There are no, there are no. But the dots aren't really connected ever. It's disjointed chaos.
I don't know that I would say it's chaos. I would tell you that there's just a ton of stuff going on with a lot of things, variables that you can't control, and so that's difficult for some people to get their heads around. But the Marine Corps is really good at taking land. I mean, they're just really good at it, right? And they knew what they were doing, and there was a broader purpose and all of those things to be able to get that done. But when the Marine Corps is rolling, it's an amazing logistics organization. I mean, I appreciate that more now than ever, right? But it's not like we ran out of fuel like what you see in the Ukraine right now. It's not like we ran out of food. We were rolling, and it was well planned. They knew what they were doing. What's different now, though, is in past people who have done deployments over there, when I hear about what they do, I mean, they have all these manifests for people. They have to plan out their route in advance. We didn't do any of that. We just went wherever we wanted to go. Just like, okay, we got to go here. Let's roll. We got food from other Marine units, and we just grabbed MRE cases or bottles of water and rolled. And so, we figured it out. But right now, I don't think any units leave the perimeter without a careful manifest and a route plan and whatever else. And we just didn't have that. We had that in very general terms, but it's a very different world there now, and became a very different world, even 2 years later after we'd done the invasion.
Yeah. So Oscar Mike was a real term for you, huh? You use that once or twice in your life?
Yeah. Well, some of these terms, what's funny is that I don't generally cuss a lot, and I'm certainly not proud of that. But when you lock in to this sort of Marine Corps way, and I could drop an F-bomb as a verb, an adjective, an adverb, noun, whatever. You could work it into almost anything. It was rather amazing.
Well, I grew up in a corral, so some of that stuff's just survival. I mean, it's It is what it is. It's just lexicon.
Yeah.
Just lexicon.
I love my time. I'm so thankful in many ways that I got to go do that. I would have been very upset if they'd have had that war without me, because that's what I trained for a long time, and I got out shortly thereafter, and it was the right time for me to get out. But I am thankful for my time there. We saw some absolutely amazing Marines do incredible things, and a lot of them didn't get the credit. There were a lot of people who were on the tip of the spear who rolled into that country, and because they're privates and lance corporals, they saw a lot of crazy stuff, and they didn't get the medals and things they deserved, whereas a bunch of officers and people who were living in the back and the rear with the gear got bronze stars and all kinds of other stuff. And I think that's kind of a travesty in the broader scheme of things from my point of view.
Agree, 100%, 100%. Let's talk a little bit more about the Marines. I'm the world's biggest Marine wannabe. Never was, just never, path never carried me that way. But I think everybody makes basic training, which sucks, but it's meant to suck. But I think I honestly would have been a good Marine, because my personality is kind of suited. I like being regulated. I like guidelines and boundaries and rules and expectations. The expectations are always pretty clear, right? I mean, it's not that complicated. Just do what I tell you and do it quickly and efficiently. To me, that's the Marine Corps.
Well, it is, but the people always talk about, boot camp sucks and boot camp's terrible. Boot camp is a mind thing. It's not even hard physically. It is not hard physically. Lots of people could make it through boot camp, and we had people who lost 40 pounds, in the course of that 3 months, or about 50 pounds, whatever it would be. And a lot of those people only stay in the Marine Corps for 3 or 4 years, but it's far more of a mental exercise than it is a physical one. And the difference between, the basic reconnaissance course and down at Coronado versus boot camp, which is just up the road at MCRD, is night and day, right? I mean, recon school was very hard for me, academically, physically, everything. Boot camp's easy. I mean, it's just not that hard.
Yeah. Interesting. But there, if you go to YouTube, you can see, and this is why I would just be screwed at this, but when they I don't know if, I assume they do this, but all the time, but you get off the bus and basically you've got not one but like half a dozen drill sergeants screaming at you, and you got to take your sack out, put your sack back. It's just simple directions, and but they're screaming at the top of their lungs, and a lot of people would not be able to. You kind of have to learn the patterns or cadence of their speech, and I'm telling you, I'd be the dude that just get his ass. I'd have 3 guys right on my and they get into my head immediately. But
and that's why it's a mental game, though.
Yeah, it's absolutely, but that's why I would like it, honestly, because I just think it'd sharpen you. I mean,
I got a story for you. So I was in a survival school, and I won't go into too much detail, but I was really tired, and it had been a couple days, and this guy was screaming at me to rake the dirt with my fingers. And so I was like, he told me what he wanted to do, so I was out there raking the dirt with my fingers, and I was doing the best job I possibly could. I was laying on the ground, raking the dirt with my fingers, getting the rows just right. He comes over and starts screaming at me that my rows aren't straight. And I'm like, okay, so I'll try better. So I kind of raced it all again, started again, racing the dirt. Then he came over and he kicked my rows, which I'd worked so hard on. I have to tell you that I was going to beat his ass. I was like, you and I have a problem now. I'm raking this dirt, and I'm going to kick your ass right now.
You mother F-bomber.
Yeah, you messed up my raked dirt. And then I was like, I've got to let this go, because this has nothing to do with raking dirt. This has to do with whether this guy thinks he can get in my head, and if I would have challenged him, I would have been kicked out of the course, right? But I gutted it out, and I dealt with it again. But I was just like, if this guy comes back and walks on my raked dirt, I'm going to kick the living tar out of him. And I had to let it go.
He's in for it. Yeah. This is interesting, because my next question, I swear to you, is, have you ever been underappreciated in the Marines? See, the story you just told, I don't think you were underappreciated, but
no,
Some people would have said you were. It's a relative, I suppose.
But that was all training stuff. And so, I chose the Force Recon mission. I loved my unit up there. When I graduated from law school, I thought about going into the Marine Corps as an officer and going to do that. But I would have had to leave the Force Recon mission. I didn't want to do that. That wasn't where I wanted to be. And so I don't feel I was underappreciated. All these people who thank me on Veterans Day, it's like I had the best time. I just really enjoyed the whole thing. I was not enjoying my time so much after I got back from Iraq, but I didn't feel underappreciated. I feel that I had a great time and I loved what I did. Sometimes I couldn't believe they paid me to do that stuff. I mean, you get paid to jump out of airplanes all day. That's good stuff.
That's pretty cool stuff. It's probably a similar question, but were you ever treated unfairly in the Marines during basic or when you served?
In boot camp, I had an instructor that got in my face once, and he asked me a question. He's like, do you think you can kick my ass? And I was like, well, yeah, I actually do think I can kick your ass, but I'm not going to tell you that. I didn't say that out loud, but I was just kind of had to swallow that, and I dealt with it. And but,
so you said no, I don't.
I just said no, I just let it go. He pulled me aside, took me in the showers, was screaming at me. And he's like, and I was like, oh, 100%, I think I can kick your ass. You're about 5'4", and I think I could throw you across the shower. But that's minor stuff. I mean, I hear these stories about people who were beaten or mistreated, but I've been thrown off a boat in the middle of the ocean and told to swim to shore. We've had thrown out of helicopters. It's just that's the way it goes. You might like to be treated differently. I do think I saw some really poor examples of leadership when I was in Iraq. We had a team that got left out too long. They'd been compromised, and we couldn't get a decision to be made by our commanding officer. And I watched some really amazing leadership by some senior staff NCOs that went out and basically saved this team when somebody couldn't make a decision. So, but I didn't really have much to lose. I was in a good spot in my life, and I knew that I'd be coming home, and I never doubted it for a second. But I learned a lot from that, right? You learned by watching people around you, and I know I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm sure a lot of other people did too, and I got to learn from what they did, and some of those lessons are with me today.
Have you used those lessons you learned in the Marines in your professional business career?
Well, yes, because the one great thing about the Marine Corps is that they say everyone's green, right? That we don't have skin color, everyone's green. And it takes you down to a point where you're just generally worthless, right? Everyone gets their breaking point. Mm-hmm. You're just in a pile of sweat or unhappiness or whatever else, and you can get through it. And so that's something that every Marine has, is that they've been broken down at some point, and their point is very different for each person. I read all these things about different challenges of people having in the business world about leadership. Leading people who are full and slept well the night before and have nice homes, that's one thing, and that's a challenge, and I don't dismiss that. But try leading people when it's cold and it's raining and they haven't slept in a couple days and everyone's feet hurts and your rucks are really heavy and they're really digging into your shoulders. That's a different kind of leadership, and I would argue that kind of leadership is easy to transition into the business world when it's not so easy to go the other way.
Right. Absolutely. Would you, if your son Adam came to you and said, Dad, I want to be, maybe he already has, but Dad, I want to be in the Marines, what would you say?
Well, I would definitely be in favor of either of my children going into the military. I don't know that my route would be the best for either of them, but people try to paint the military all in one, or the Marine Corps all in one, broad brushstroke. But those people who are in the air wing have very different experiences than those people who are in infantry units. Those people who are in the Air Force, like some of the officers that I pointed out who are flying drones out of Vegas, that's a very different world than somebody who is, a water sanitation specialist who's, taking care of water in the Middle East. There's lots of examples of people. We were rolling looking for a fuel point at one point in Iraq, and rolled up out there. It's just dust everywhere. It looks like Star Wars, just flat dust. And you can't see anything anywhere. And there's some Lance Corporal out there with two other PFCs, and they're basically running a gas station out there in the middle of nowhere with nothing around them, right? And their experience is very different than the pilot who was flying overhead drinking a cup of coffee as they were going on a bombing run, right? It's a totally different set of circumstances. And there were people who were doing intel stuff back at home who were in air-conditioned units kicking it while these three Marines are out there in the middle of dust and nastiness and nothing. And they're all in the military going for a common cause. So I think my kids could benefit tremendously from some of the things in the military, but they would just choose a different MOS.
Right. Great point. Great answer.
Sam, the thing is, though, is when I talk to young people, and I think we have a common friend who's serving in the Air Force out near where who was, working for our Meridian family at one point.
Yep.
If you're 22, 23 years old and you can dedicate 4 years of your life to go do something, and at the end of that 4 years, you've been in the military, you've traveled around, you've done a number of different deployments, you've learned a new skill set, most of the time, that's a pretty good use of 3 or 4 years. The opportunity cost isn't too high for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're young, and now when you're old, like you and me, we probably look at our time a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's right. But could you have traded in your early 20s? Could you have traded 3 or 4 years away from politics and gone and done that, and been a different person for it? Maybe.
Oh yeah, I easily wasted 6-7 years in my 20s. Absolutely. I mean, I could have replaced them with something like that easily. I don't talk politics on here. We're not about to now, but this is sort of it's not a political question, but it's just I'd like, Matt and I were political operatives, and I'd like to get his perspective on this. When people say that they don't vote or their vote doesn't count, my response is, well, then you're not, and you probably disagree with this, Matt, but I say you're not entitled to military protection. What is your thought when someone says, my vote doesn't count or I'm not going to vote? Does it matter to you?
Well, most of the time, the people saying that are people I'd probably prefer not vote anyway. So I'm not too I'm not too bummed about that. So
that's a fact.
For me, from a GOTV perspective, I'll let them consider that and say, hey, right on. I got a bunch of hate. I put something on Twitter recently, Sam, where I said, hey, I know everyone should want everyone to vote, but I'm not sure about some of you. And I had all these people. Oh, Matt, you're a terrible human being. You need to change that. I'm like, no, I'll stick with that. I'm all good. I'm not going to retract it. I'll let it ride.
Okay, well, I guess you'll be consistent in your answer here as well. Oh, man. Really, the last question I have for you is an off-the-wall question that I've been asking guests this year, but it's interesting because you get different. Everybody has a different answer to it. What do you carry in your wallet? And I'm not talking about money. That has value to you?
Almost nothing. I have credit cards. I have money. I have actually, my wife gives me a hard time because they always say don't carry your Social Security card around with you. I've had my Social Security card in my wallet since I've been 16 years old. I've never lost it. I never lose anything. It's all like, what if you lose it? I'm like, no, I'm not going to lose it. I've never lost it. Why would I lose it? There's nothing in there that's super valuable. And I try to keep it as thin as possible, and it's all about my wallet is there for identification and to make financial transactions, and that's it.
That's it. Okay. Very good. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. It's good to talk to you. I haven't talked to you for a while.
I think for your listeners, Generation Kill is a great book. The movie's good too. I encourage our series. I'm not a movie, but series. And I would encourage people to watch it. But there's always a little Hollywood and everything. But in terms of capturing the sentiment and the language and the equipment and everything else, they do a really good job. The technical advisors on that were locked on in terms of the way they presented the material. 100%.
Yeah, I think you can still go to HBO Max or whatever and get it. You can also download tons of clips off of YouTube. It's just from time to time I go to YouTube just to get a laugh because there's some really good scenes in there, and it's eye opening. And I for those that get offended by people like David Goggins using language, you probably shouldn't watch this because it's they throw around some racist terms, and they throw around some big cuss words, and it's real. It's raw. But that's why I like it, because it's real. And for like when guys like you say that it's authentic, it makes it that much better to me. So, well, appreciate it, my friend. And anybody wants to follow Matt on social media, you can go check him out at Matt Rexroad. He's one of the few. You're verified, or are you going to pay Elon then to be verified on Twitter?
I'm not paying Elon $8. There's no chance of that. Zero.
Okay, but he got verified the old-fashioned way. He earned it. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.
Just hold on.